A new world disorder, the US-China rivalry. The 21st century is defined by a defining geopolitical rivalry, the United States versus China. This competition is multifaceted. It encompasses economics, technology, military power, and ideology. At its core lies a fundamental question: can a rising power and an established power coexist peacefully? The US has long been the world's dominant power. However, China's economic rise over the past 4 decades has been staggering. This has shifted the global balance of power. China now challenges the US across multiple domains. This rivalry has led to tensions and confrontations. Trade wars, technological competition, and military buildups have become commonplace. Both countries view the other with suspicion and distrust. The stakes are incredibly high. The outcome of this rivalry will determine the future of the international order. It will shape the lives of billions of people around the world.
Sanctions as a tool of statecraft. Sanctions have become a common tool of foreign policy in the modern era. They are a way for countries to exert pressure on rivals without resorting to military force. Sanctions aim to alter the target country's behavior by imposing economic pain or diplomatic isolation. There are various types of sanctions. These can range from targeted measures against individuals to comprehensive embargoes on entire countries. They can restrict trade, freeze assets, or limit access to financial markets. The effectiveness of sanctions is a subject of debate. Proponents argue that they can be a powerful tool for achieving foreign policy objectives. They can weaken adversarial regimes and deter aggression. Critics argue that sanctions often fail to achieve their intended goals. They can harm ordinary citizens while having little impact on the ruling elite. Sanctions can also backfire. They can strengthen the resolve of the targeted country or push it closer to other adversaries.
The China Challenge. Why sanctions? The United States has imposed a series of sanctions on China in recent years. These sanctions are rooted in a complex web of geopolitical and economic factors. At the heart of the matter is the perception that China poses a growing challenge to American interests and values. One key driver is the race for technological dominance. The US views China's technological advancements, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence and 5G, with increasing alarm. It fears that China could surpass the US and gain a strategic advantage. Another major point of contention is Taiwan. China claims the self-governing island as its own territory and has vowed to reunify it with the mainland. The US, while officially adhering to the One China policy, has deepened its ties with Taiwan and provided it with military support. Human rights concerns also factor into the US's decision to impose sanctions. The US has condemned China's treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang province and its crackdown on pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong.
America's arsenal. Decoding the sanctions. The U.S. has employed a range of sanctions against China, targeting specific individuals, companies, and sectors of the Chinese economy. Technology restrictions are a key component. The U.S. has blacklisted Chinese tech giants like Huawei and ZTE, barring them from accessing American technology and markets. It has also imposed export controls on sensitive technologies, such as semiconductors, to prevent them from falling into Chinese hands. Investment bans are another tool. The U.S. has restricted American investments in Chinese companies deemed to be linked to the Chinese military or involved in human rights abuses. Human rights sanctions have targeted Chinese officials and entities implicated in the repression in Xinjiang and Hong Kong. These sanctions freeze assets and impose travel bans, aiming to hold those responsible accountable for abuses.
Section 5. The Dragon responds, China's countermeasures. China has not remained passive in the face of US sanctions. It has responded with a mix of defiance, retaliation, and strategic maneuvering. Beijing views the sanctions as an attempt to contain its rise and maintain American hegemony. One key element of China's response has been its push for technological self-reliance. Recognizing its vulnerability to U.S. sanctions on semiconductors and other critical technologies, China has poured resources into developing its domestic industries. China has also retaliated with sanctions of its own. It has targeted U.S. individuals and entities involved in arms sales to Taiwan or critical of China's human rights record. These tit-for-tat sanctions highlight the escalating tensions between the two powers. Furthermore, China has sought to strengthen its alliances and partnerships around the world. It has deepened its economic ties with countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, offering an alternative to U.S. influence.
Section 6. Collateral damage, global repercussions. The US-China sanctions war has far-reaching consequences that extend well beyond the two countries directly involved. The interconnected nature of the global economy means that shocks in one part of the world are felt elsewhere. One significant impact has been on global tech supply chains. The US sanctions on Chinese tech companies have disrupted the flow of goods and services, leading to shortages and price hikes. This has highlighted the world's dependence on a few key players for critical technologies. The sanctions have also contributed to uncertainty in the global economy. The trade war between the US and China, fueled by tariffs and other protectionist measures, has dampened global growth and investment. Moreover, the US-China rivalry has exacerbated political divisions worldwide. Countries are increasingly forced to choose sides, aligning themselves with either Washington or Beijing. This has further polarized the international system.
Section 7. The decoupling dilemma. A world divided? The escalating sanctions war between the US and China has raised concerns about the possibility of decoupling. Decoupling refers to the deliberate separation of the two economies, with reduced trade, investment, and technological exchange. Proponents of decoupling argue that it is necessary to protect national security and reduce dependence on a strategic rival. They believe that the US and China are on an inevitable collision course and that decoupling is the best way to manage the risks. Opponents of decoupling warn of the significant economic and geopolitical costs. They argue that it would be highly disruptive, leading to job losses, higher prices, and slower growth. They also question whether complete decoupling is even feasible, given the deep integration of the two economies. The reality is likely to be a partial decoupling, with some sectors, like sensitive technologies, seeing greater separation, while others remain intertwined. The extent and pace of decoupling will depend on political decisions and market forces.
Section 8. A path to dialogue. Can diplomacy prevail? Despite the escalating tensions and the growing rivalry, diplomacy remains essential. The US and China must find ways to manage their differences, prevent misunderstandings, and avoid catastrophic conflict. Dialogue and engagement are crucial for building trust, identifying common ground, and addressing shared challenges. Areas of potential cooperation include climate change, global health security, and nuclear non-proliferation. However, diplomacy will require both sides to show flexibility and a willingness to compromise. They must resist the temptation to view the relationship solely through the lens of competition and recognize the importance of cooperation for the sake of global stability.
Section 9. The high stakes, the future of global order. The US-China rivalry is the defining geopolitical challenge of our time. The outcome of this competition will have profound consequences for the future of the international order. It will shape the global balance of power, the rules of the game, and the lives of billions of people. If the rivalry continues to escalate unchecked, it could lead to a more divided and unstable world. A new Cold War, characterized by ideological divisions, economic blocs, and military buildups, is a distinct possibility. However, if the US and China can find ways to manage their rivalry peacefully and cooperate on shared challenges, there is hope for a more stable and prosperous future. A world where the two powers coexist and compete within a rules-based order would be in the best interests of all. The stakes could not be higher.